Hello and welcome to APTN National News Weekend. I'm Darrell Stranger. Pope Francis is coming to Canada next week to apologize for the abuses committed at Catholic-run residential schools. Here's Tina House with a look at the upcoming visit.
When the Indigenous delegation traveled to Rome, Italy in late March of this year, hopes were high that by telling Pope Francis about the attempted genocide of Indigenous people in Canada, it would allow for the next step of healing to begin.
I'm very, very encouraged by the audience we had today, going forward into our relationship, a new relationship.
And for 85-year-old ANGIE CRERAR from Grande Prairie, Alberta, she was able to tell him her story about being a survivor.
And one thing we have now is our pride. They did not break us. We're still here, and we intend to live here forever.
And after 3 days of private audiences between the Pope and the Métis, First Nations and Inuit delegation, Pope Francis addressed the general audience on the final day.
Listening to your voices, I was able to enter into and be deeply grieved by the stories of the suffering, hardship, discrimination, and various forms of abuse that some of you experienced, particularly in the residential schools. It's chilling.
But no one suspected these meetings would end with these long-awaited words.
For the deplorable conduct of these members of the Catholic Church,
e vorrei dirvi di tutto cuore, sono molto addolorato. E mi unisco ai fratelli vescovi canadesi.
I ask for God's forgiveness, and I want to say to you with all my heart, I am very sorry.
Former National Chief Phil Fontaine has traveled to Rome before to meet with the previous Pope, but says, like many others, he was taken by surprise at the apology.
In my case, I didn't think he would say, I am sorry. I didn't think I would hear him say how he felt shame for and guilt for what the church did to our people, and that he was prepared to come to Canada.
And now with his plane expected to land in Canada on July the 24th, Pope Francis is expected to formally apologize to residential school survivors and their families. This will be the first time ever that the highest rank within the Catholic Church has ever accepted responsibility for the crimes committed against Indigenous children that were put into those schools and terribly abused. Ralph Leon is now chief of his community, but at the age of 10 was forced to attend residential school just outside of Mission, BC.
I haven't come back here because of what's still in my mind, what I witnessed here. The mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse that I witnessed here.
Chief Leon says the church must do more to address what is continuing to happen to Indigenous people.
But there needs to be a plan, a recovery plan for our people. Like I said, we're like a broken people still. This is only one residential school. There's still the scoop, you know, foster care, day school, all those things. And it started where?
And with preparations well underway for the visit from the Pope, which starts in Edmonton, Alberta, Tony Belcourt, who's originally from Lac St. Anne, says he has concerns over what will happen in his home community during the annual pilgrimage.
That for a long time, the people in the community have been trying to get the church to turn over records of our graves. We have an unmarked grave site. There was a cairn put up there by our people a long time ago, but it doesn't cover the full footprint of the grave site itself. So, and that footprint goes right out to where this new paved road is. So the horrible thought I have in my head is, you know, thousands of people standing on our unmarked graves right beside that paved road so they can wave to the Pope when he goes by.
For other survivors like Geraldine Shingoose from Manitoba, she says she isn't quite sure how well this visit will be received from other survivors in Canada.
Like, you know, that the whole intent of this visit, I see it as a photo op and as a, like, you know, it doesn't come across truthful.
Shingoose says that although Pope Francis made no mention of the suspected unmarked graves of children that were buried near residential schools, she is hopeful that this visit will help bring more of the truth of what really happened.
And in that walking together, they're saying there's reconciliation and healing that they want to bring, or we can't have that without that truth.
For Cassidy CARON, she says there could have been more done to include the voices of survivors in the planning.
There have been challenges along the way. There has been unclear processes. There has been unclear authorities in decision making throughout the entire process. And once again, you know, we could have had more input. We could have, you know, been able to bring survivors to the table to guide this process. The opportunities, though, just haven't been there to the extent that we had hoped.
For years, there were stories about the horrors that took place behind closed doors. Stories of horrific abuse suffered by survivors that were told over and over again, but no one seemed to listen. And those traumas were then buried, eventually manifesting into a lifetime of sadness, addiction, and chaos. For the thousands of children that made it out alive, that pain also reverberated into intergenerational trauma as they grew up and had families of their own. In many cases, this caused further dysfunction as the trauma from residential schools never fully healed. It's expected that Pope Francis will offer his first official apology to residential school survivors and their families on July the 25th. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Leaders attending a Dene National Assembly this week are discussing a proposal to conduct multi-year work on the 15 residential school sites in the Northwest Territories. Here's Charlotte Moore-Jacobs with that story.
In one section of the LaPointe Hall, we were literally right over these graves. We talked to the nuns and the priests, and you know, they just said, well, it's just in your mind. But,
the Dene Nation is vying to search 15 residential school sites with ground-penetrating radar for unmarked graves across Denendeh. Submitting that proposal comes with big emotions, important questions for survivors and their families who are attending the Dene National Assembly outside of Yellowknife.
What's the protocol after that? Is that something that the First Nation ourselves, are we the ones that are going to set up the protocol to make sure that the ceremonies that normally come with something like that is done properly?
The project is expected to take 2 years and include archival research and consultation with elders. Research coordinator Tom Andrews has experience with searches in Fort Providence and Thethilly Narrows.
You know, we know in a lot of the communities there are a key number of elders who have very particular knowledge about the history of the residential schools, where the graves are, etc., and it'd be really important to combine and collect that knowledge as well.
How far can you pick up the ground graveyard and with the radar? Because I'll tell you now, indigenous graveyard, sometime in Esker, probably be deep, and probably on Muskeg it'll probably be frozen ground, probably be shallow.
Depending on the kind of machine, it can see up to 8 meters, but the depth at which it works the best is 1 to 2 meters below the surface.
Betsy Clay First Nation member Rebecca Gray also comes with experience in burial research and will earn a PhD as she helps with the project.
Yeah, I'm just curious to see how does that affect you, like emotionally, spiritually?
I found myself affected by it and still continue to, not just with the impact of the children's spirits, but also with the surviving members who are still there in the communities.
The proposal includes long-term healing and memorial work, which could be similar to Fort Providence, who created a commemorative site with names of children who died at the Sacred Heart Mission School.
I've been to the memorial site in Providence. I have 3 of my relatives that never made it home. 3 years in a row, I've visited the site along with some other elders.
I have often wondered what happened to them.
Family of missing children like survivor Paul Andrew says he hopes the work will bring him answers.
Is it possible that I have cousins somewhere in the world? Or is that it? I don't know if those questions will ever be answered, but I sure hope that we can get a sense of that, so that I will have closure, and that my dad and my grandmother will also have closure in this. No more wondering what happened to my aunts.
Charlotte Mort Jacobs, APTN National News, Willie, Chief Dry Geese Territory.
Time for a short break. More stories coming up. Welcome back. Residential school survivors from across Dene are preparing for the papal visit to Alberta next week. Our reporter Charlotte Mort Jacobs brings us more on the upcoming trip.
Simpson? Oh, I didn't know that. Martina Norwegian remembers the positive impact the 1987 papal visit had in her community of LITTLECHILD, Northwest Territories. She hopes Indigenous communities will experience similar healing opportunities when Pope Francis comes to Turtle Island this month.
You know, like a lot of times we don't agree, but we still have to live together, and we still have to walk parallel if we don't agree, to try to understand.
Norwegian is a residential school survivor who attended LaPointe Hall and Bombas Hall in LITTLECHILD, Fort Simpson. She's also a faith keeper, involved in the Sacred Heart Church since 1995, and a lay presider who steps in to deliver church services when the priest is not available. Norwegian will be attending the papal visit in Alberta.
I just feel that my part in it, and being part of the church, has to somehow incorporate that. You know, like we're not two different organizations. The Pope is not, you know, like we're one. And so I think that whatever experience that I take away from this, I think it has to be relatable for in my homilies or in my sermons.
Norwegian is part of a 40-person delegation attending the visit, supported by the Mackenzie-Fort Smith Diocese. Bishop John Hansen says the trip is one part of a very long journey.
Just as an example, this trip itself, organizing these delegates, working with the other communities, this has been an amazing opportunity to, as I said before, to meet new people, to discuss these issues.
The Decho First Nation, along with other Indigenous groups in Canada, have called for the Roman Catholic Church to rescind the Doctrine of Discovery, a policy issued by the Church in the 15th century that defines land unoccupied by Christians as up for grabs.
Those documents no longer have any bearing. They're ancient documents, part of our history, which is unfortunate, but they have no current bearing on how we work in the world. So if symbolically they need to be repudiated in a public statement, I'm all for that.
Ernest Betsina is also a delegate and a residential school survivor who attended Grolier Hall in Inuvik.
I'm pretty sure that the Pope will apologize, but it's got to be authentic. It's got to be genuine. It's got to be to the people, and I'm hoping that the people will accept it. I'm hoping that people would start healing from there.
Before the papal trip, he will also attend the Dene National Special Assembly, where communities will discuss ground-penetrating radar in the search for unmarked graves on former residential school sites. He hopes a papal apology comes with compensation to survivors for healing services and the release of all records held by the churches.
For the graves that have not been identified yet, I'm hoping that that they would find the right records, they would find the right who's buried, and whoever they may be, the spirits will rest easy.
The papal visit in Treaty 6 territory will take place July 25th and 26th. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
The Lac St. Anne pilgrimage site in Alberta will be hosting Pope Francis on July 26th. APTN's Chris Stewart went to the site to see what preparations are being made for the Pope's visit.
2022 brings back the annual Lake St. Anne pilgrimage for the first time since 2019. Each summer, tens of thousands of people come to this sacred location and have been doing so since 1889. Now, the site is preparing for Pope Francis' visit. A new ramp has been built to allow people with mobility issues to be able to access the lake's water.
We call Lac St. Anne Wakumne, or God's Lake. Long before settlers came, Wakumne has had a deep spiritual significance to the First Nation people and was known for its healing waters. This site is sacred. Our people have taken the spiritual journey to these waters for generations, some walking here from great distances.
Chief Tony Alexis says the Pope's expected apology on Canadian soil will be the beginning of a healing journey for many, but not all.
For some, our people, Pope Francis' apology will not be enough. Healing is not linear. This apology will be a fundamental step towards forgiveness, closure, healing, and reconciliation for many others. Much like Wakumne, the healing abilities, it is fitting that the Pope's visit to this healing place will bring healing to so many.
Speaking today on behalf of the
Tracy Fidel represents the Lac St. Anne Métis. She hopes the apology will begin to start the process of reconciliation.
We had taken ourselves to heart the apology of early April in Rome, and we feel that it's incumbent upon the Catholic Archdiocese and the Church in general to honor those words.
She hopes that the papal visit will bring attention and action to help identify and protect unmarked graves in the Lac St. Anne area.
We have been concerned about the unmarked graves for many years now, not only the past week when there's been highlighted attention to this issue. If the occasion of the papal visit helps us to ensure that these unmarked graves are accurately identified and properly protected, then I think we will all have achieved an objective, I think, that matters to all of us.
Up to 25,000 people are expected to attend to meet old friends, use the healing waters, and create memories that will last a lifetime. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Lac St. Anne, Alberta.
Time for one final break. Stay with us. More when we come back. Welcome back. The Pope will be in Canada by Monday next week, and as organizers scramble to make last-minute preparations, a Winnipeg residential school survivor says she and others are feeling left behind. Sab Jonesa brings us this story.
9-year residential school survivor Jerry Shingoose didn't expect to be this stressed out.
It's like when we were in residential school again.
She has spent the past few weeks searching for resources on how to attend the Pope's upcoming visit, but the answers are not easy to find.
The survivors they need to make the phone calls on their own.
Instead of preparing herself mentally for the difficult trip, she's had to deal with logistics instead.
So in my planning, I want to be protected too as well, because we're standing in front of evil source that brought harm to us residential school survivors.
The Pope's upcoming visit was named Walking Together, signaling the Church's commitment to put residential school survivors first. But survivors like Shingus feel like they're walking alone.
It's very oppressive. It's very challenging.
The Government of Canada announced $30 million to fund travel fees for survivors, but that money is proving hard to find.
The survivors have to search on their own, like, Google search, and then they need to make the phone calls on their own.
Our own research turned up 0 results for how to claim the funding, so we turned to the media relations person for a list of who received it. This was a dead end as well, as we were directed multiple times to the same Government of Canada webpage with vague information on what the funds are for, but yet again, not who to contact. For Jerry Shingus, this is proof that survivors are not the focus for this historical visit.
And they should have made a link available where survivors could register, and they could have accommodations made for them, and just make it easy for us.
Many may wonder why survivors would go to such great lengths to see the Pope, but for Jerry, she isn't just going for herself.
I'm going to stand there for my brother George, who never got to tell his story, and I'm going to stand there for my parents, because my parents, their children were taken. And I'm going to stand there for the survivors that can't make it. I'm going to stand there strong and proud.
For those still living after the atrocities took place in the residential school system, there is pride in showing that they are still here and that they are not alone.
I just want to stand there as a Anishinaabe, proud, and let them know that we survived, and my hair is long. Nobody could cut it for me anymore.
And though the papal visit is only 1 week long, Jerry Shingus hopes the Pope will see the extent of the lasting effects and sincerely acknowledge the pain left.
Yeah, I carry it every day. I carry that experience every day. And then he needs to see that. And we can't move forward with healing or reconciliation until they acknowledge that truth and what happened to those little children.
The National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available for survivors and others who might need support. That number is 1-866-925-4419. All right, that's all we have for you tonight. I'm Darrell Stranger. Thank you for joining us. Miigwech, and have a great weekend.